The World Science Fiction Convention hosts the Hugo Awards. But who really votes for the Hugo Awards and why do they vote? That's what this video is about. So the people who are all upset about the slate being nominated for the Hugos and so on, and they think they're going to, either slate is going to actually have any effect on the voting for the Hugos, don't really understand the Hugos and haven't been to World Cons. Why I say that is that, yeah, there's some politics involved with all of this, but the real purpose for voting, and people ask, you have to pay to vote. Why do you have to pay to vote? Does anybody answer that question? The reason is real simple. The ballot that you get when you vote, the number one question on the top of the ballot is, where is the next World Con being held? And what happens is that is the reason that people vote, not the Hugos. Don't get me wrong, the Hugos are important, but the real issue is, where is the next convention being held? There are some complicated rules about how it moves from region to region inside North America, and if it moves outside North America, and they're esoteric, and I don't want to even go into them. But what happens is that fan groups decide that they're going to bid to hold a Worldcon. So they get together and they host parties at Worldcons. You vote for where the next Worldcon will be in 2 years. It's 2 years because it takes time to set up the hotels and everything. I remember when they changed the rules. It's a massive deal to change the rules. Saw one video about, we'll go into the business meeting and try and change the rules. You have no idea how arcane and how complicated it is to change the rules of the World Science Fiction Convention. It's deliberately complicated. But what happens is that you vote on where the next convention is going to be held. People put in a bid, and then they host bid parties. They're called bid parties. So all during the day at a World Science Fiction Convention, you have all these panels with authors, you have presentations. NASA often comes, people from NASA come, even NASA itself officially has come, various interesting speakers. We had Cliff Stoll, who wrote The Cuckoo's Egg. If you haven't read that, I remember him at one of the conventions. Richard Stallman, who from the GNU Foundation, was actually there and at one of the conventions and spoke. I've been to a variety of conventions, heard a variety of different people speak. It's a fascinating convention during the day. At night, it's party city. I mean, what happens is that they always have a hotel which is called the Party Hotel, where all the parties will be hosted, and almost all the suites and many of the rooms are reserved for parties, and there are party floors and non-party floors. And what happens is, most people that I know, you make a list of where the parties that you really want to hit, and you go to the highest floor in the building, because you don't want to avoid the elevators at all costs, but you take the elevator once to the top, and then you're going down the staircases for the rest of the night, going from party to party to see what's going on. And the bid parties are the big parties. That's where the money really is, because it's a convention. It has several thousand people. If it's in California, there have been 10,000 people to a convention. If they're smaller right now. We're talking 2,000 to 3,000, maybe 5,000. I'm not sure exactly what their estimates are for SaskCon, SasquatchCon, or whatever it's called. I may not be able to pronounce it correctly. But what happens is, that's where the real money is. That's what people pay the money to vote, because the bid committee that wins the election for the location gets that chunk of change, which they have to use to pay for reserving the hotel and all the facilities and everything else. So that pales in comparison to any particular author. Let's be honest. What happens is that If an author is local to an area, he will have a lot of people, because if a bid is coming up, you pick a city, Chicago. If you have an author who lives in the area of Chicago and goes to all the local conventions, and Chicago's got a bid for that, he is, quote, a favorite son, as the phrase goes, because if he knows the local community, fan community, and they're putting a bid on, they're going to have a lot of people coming in to vote for Chicago. So they're going to say, oh, he's a local son, so maybe I'll like him, maybe I'll read his book, maybe not. But they'll vote for that. But the big issue on the ballot is not what is the best book. It's where is the convention going to be held? Because that actually has monetary ramifications for the city. I mean, we're not talking a massive convention that we see these CES, these massive, huge conventions, E3, even Dragon Con, which is much more of a media convention, is much larger than the World Science Fiction Convention. But the real issue is the location. That's the number one. That almost always gets the most votes, because you could always say not vote for the Hugos. And there are people who just vote for the location, not for any. They're there for the party. They are fans. They're science fiction fans. They're involved with that. And the Hugos are hotly contested and everything else. I'm not downplaying that, but the real issue is that's why it's the World Science Fiction Convention, and that's the key is voting on where the convention is. And the bid parties, I mean, their publishers have, just like you have the bid parties, you'll have a publisher. I'm pretty sure Tor has that, and Bain used to have a bid a party suite come in there, and there's munchies, and some of them have, they'll check your age, and some of them have alcohol and some don't, and you have all the different kinds of groups at World Science Fiction conventions, and gay and lesbian, transgender, whatever. They're all the strange parties that are there. And you run into and there's a party board that lists where the parties are. And so you go and see where the parties are going to be. And I've even heard of some authors having small party rooms for that to promote their own. But the real big ones, the big draws, are the bid parties. And what happens is your badge that you go through, all the bid parties, they have little stickers that they attach to your badge showing that you've been in there, and they want to do pre-supporting, and there's you can even do pre-opposing, that I oppose your stuff. And you don't want to do, you want to be economically viable. Boston, I believe it was Boston, was the one infamous convention that went bankrupt. And what happened was, then throughout they had back rubs for Boston, I think it was what it was. I remember you could go in there and pay a couple of bucks. It was the next couple of conventions. They were continuing to try and raise money to pay off the debts that had been accrued by the convention committee, because the debts don't transfer from one convention committee to the next. They're independent. So each convention committee is responsible for their own debts, and they can try and raise money and so on. But what happens is that each convention committee runs the convention independently. They get the money from the voting. And the purpose behind the money is to give them the seed money for the convention. So that's why they charge. You hear this, it's, why do they charge for the Hugos? It's not for the Hugos. You don't pay to vote for the Hugos. You pay to have the option to vote for the location. And remember, this is the World Science Fiction Convention. The primary purpose of the convention is the convention. The Hugos are awards that they give for quality, and you could argue that. But what happens is that's where it's at. So the people who vote are probably, if you did it by geographic location, the ones who have the biggest bids are the ones who vote the most. For example, when Australia is bidding, you'll have, and Australia tries to win a convention every so often, and then you'll have more people from Australia voting that year, paying the money to vote to try and get the convention to come to their location. Same thing is true with Europe. When England won, when Japan won, when any region in the United States, the people in that region are the ones who are going to be voting more than that. And it's purely economics. You want the convention to in your local hometown, and you want to vote for that. So that's the people who are voting. And the Hugos are important. They're part of the convention. They're an important part, but they are not the only key part of the convention. And these people who say, oh, the sad puppies and the rabid puppies, and it was Gamergate was involved, I don't think that will have any effect on the Hugos. I think the location of the next bid has a bigger impact than either one of those. And it's just what's going to happen on there. And you can probably take a look, and maybe I'm wrong, and hopefully I am, but I bet if you take a look at where the authors live and what conventions the authors go to, you can figure out who will win. Not by who's on the best, because if an author writes a mediocre book but goes to conventions in his local area and is a good speaker, maybe not a good writer, he can influence the local fandom to come out, and they'll say, oh, I know him, I've heard him speak. And that's true. I mean, there are authors that you go through the convention, you hear them speak, you hear them maybe even do a reading of their stuff, and then you may decide to buy. And I know that I've been introduced to certain authors that way. You go in and see you hear what they have to say, and then based upon that, you go look them up to find them, because you may not have stumbled across their book or books or whatever. And but that's the key. I mean, I think that was how I ran into Glenn Cook, one of my authors that I really enjoy. Glenn Cook wrote a Black Company series, which is an amazing, fascinating series, and I like his description of it, which was it's Lord of the Rings as told by the side of the orcs. But it's fun, that sort of tongue in cheek. But it's an interesting series. Never been nominated for a Hugo. Many people wouldn't like it. I remember talking to various publishers, and some people don't like it because it's extremely dark. Let's be honest, it's really dark. The main characters are all homicidal maniacs. And what happens is that it never was nominated for a Hugo, never would win a Hugo, but it's a great book. And I heard him speak, and that made me go look it up. And you find that's the reason to go to the convention is there. And this whole thing about, is it involved with Gamergate? Perhaps there's maybe some influence, but I don't think it'll have any effect. I honestly think it will have no effect on who's going to win. Getting nominated, that they may have got them nominated, but it's who wins is probably more related to locality. As they say, all politics is local, and this is, I believe, the Hugos are all local. Maybe wrong. I'd love to hear somebody come back and prove me wrong.